Hey there everyone, welcome to Auto Bears, and this very subtle SUV is the Porsche Macan S. Back in 2004, Porsche released the Mark I Cayenne, and it was a revolution for the German brand. You could arguably say it was also the saviour of Porsche. And also, it opened the floodgates for other manufacturers who had previously not made an SUV to go and make an SUV. Examples would include Jaguar, Maserati, Bentley, and even Rolls-Royce. Now roll on to 2015 and Porsche released its second SUV in the shape of the smaller Macan, and it was clearly a worldwide hit. The Macan is Porsche's best-selling car currently. And then roll on to 2019 and the Macan had a midlife refresh with some exterior and interior improvements. And I've had this mid-range Macan S for a long weekend, and I'm going to let you know if it's any good or not. Style-wise, the Macan has always been considered to be like a little brother to the bigger Cayenne, and that's no bad thing. Both are incredibly handsome SUVs. Now for this revised version of the Macan, we've got a bit of a nip and tuck at the front of the car. I really do love the new clamshell bonnet, but it's at the back of the Macan that you can really see the difference. It now features the traditional light bar effect that you see on other Porsches like the Panamera, the new 911, and of course this big brother, the Cayenne. I think the only car missing really the light bar is the Boxster and the Cayman, but I'm sure they'll arrive in time. And of course the big highlight on this particular car is the Miami blue paint job. I mean, it just stands out. If it was my own personal choice, I don't know if I'd go for this or the Mamba green, because both of them stand out in their own way. Also, this particular car has got a few optional extras, and you can see them in the description below along with their prices at the time of filming, but some of them I don't quite think suit this particular Macan that well. I do love the fact it's got 21-inch alloy wheels, but I'm not a big fan of the silver in contrast with the Miami blue, and there are a few highlights in terms of black effects on the vehicle. And again, I'm not 100% sure about the black door handles unless we had black wing mirror covers. But that's just me, I'm just getting a little bit too pedantic. But anyway, in terms of the looks, this actually looks really stunning, and it is truly a gorgeous looking SUV. Now, before I get eaten to death, I think that's enough of looking at the outside of the Porsche Macan. Let's have a little look at the inside. Sat in the front of the Porsche Macan, you are greeted by a very well put together and comfortable interior. You can clearly tell you're sat in a Porsche. Now, of course, this being a mid-sized SUV, getting in and out of the Macan is really easy because of that raised ride height. So if you do have any mobility issues and you're after a performance SUV, well, this could very well be the one to go for. And then once you sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are incredibly comfortable and there is plenty of adjustment. Granted, I have got the full leather interior and 14-way adjustable front seats. They are both optional extras, so finding the perfect driving position is easy. Also, the steering has both rake and reach adjustment, and it is electrically operated, so that is something. The button is just under here, under the steering column. And then it comes to interior quality, which, of course, this being a Porsche, is exemplary. It is absolutely lovely in here. Even the harder plastics just feel of a brilliant quality, and you know they'll stand the test of time. Now on this particular car we have got some upgrades. Okay, we've got a lot of upgrades, but they do work here in the cabin. We have got the leather effect with the contrasting stitching. I say leather effect, it is leather. And we've got things like the air suspension, so you can actually raise and lower the car at the push of a button. Now that is a feature that I've really enjoyed using. And then when it comes to cubby spaces, it's actually not too bad. We've got some decent sized door bins. Now they're not lined with fabric, but they are kind of got this rubber effect to them, so any loose items will rattle around a little bit, but not as bad as if it was just hard plastics. And then we've got a couple of cup holders here behind the gear lever, and there is like a little cubby space with a 12-volt socket. Now you can buy a cover for that, of course it would be an optional extra, so it does look a little bit odd being exposed. And then you've got the centre armrest, which is a decent size. You've got a couple of USB-C inputs, a SIM card and an SD input as well for your SD card. Also for comfort levels, you can slide that forward for longer journeys. And then you have got the glove box, which is lockable, and that is very handy, which is of a decent size, and I really do like that. and again it is actually lined with fabric. So if you're used to being in these cars where the infotainment system controls things like the air conditioning and climate control, you're probably going to have a panic attack when you sit in the Macan. Don't worry, Porsche will provide you with a brown paper bag, though it is an optional extra. If, however, you're a bit old-fashioned like myself and you do sit in the Macan, the first thing you're going to get is a contact high every time you touch a button on this interior, because everything has a reassuring click and feels incredibly well damped. There must be somebody at Porsche whose job is only to do the buttons in all of their cars. Everything just feels well damped and has a reassuring click to it as you go through it. It's really lovely in here, and a nice feature I do like is that the dual zone climate control, actually the front driver and passenger get to control their section of fans, including how powerful they are and the temperature and where they are directed. That is actually quite a unique thing I've seen. Now, the next generation Macan, Porsche have said, is going to be fully electric, so don't be surprised if all the buttons disappear and you get what we get now in the Cayenne and Panamera by having the shiny black plastic with touch sensitive buttons, which can be a little bit fiddly to use, especially when on the move. Now, speaking of shiny black plastic, there is a little bit here on the center console and on the doors, and it does give a nice reassuring lift to the cabin, but it is very much prone to fingerprints and smudging if you do press it. But all in all, I really love the interior of this Macan. The steering wheel feels lovely in your hands. I love the leather effect and the contrasting stitching, and I just love the metal effect as well. Now, we have got some steering wheel controls on this Macan, and we've also got the flappy paddle gearbox as well, and again those are proper metal as well, which I absolutely love. So yeah, all in all, I absolutely love the interior of this Macan, and before I get too carried away, let's go have a little look in the back. But firstly, real buttons, I love it. Sat in the back of the Porsche Macan, it's actually not too bad back here. Definitely somebody of my size won't have any trouble getting comfortable. Now, that seat is almost set to my driving position, but it just needs to slide forward a couple of inches when I put my key in the ignition. But I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, there's an okay amount of knee room already, and headroom is not too bad either. I think if you are 6 foot tall, however, you might find it a little bit cramped and will only be suitable for short to medium range journeys. But once you are sat here, you find that it's actually very comfortable, and interior quality is really good as well. We've got the full leather interior back here, and on top of the doors we've got the leather with the contrasting stitching. But again, like the front, it does feel quite hard. But where you can rest your arm down here, it is nice and squidgy, so that is a blessing. Interior cubby spaces are a little bit hit and miss back here, I'll be honest. The door pockets are of an okay size, you can get a medium-sized bottle of drink in there, but we've got no pockets on the backs of the front seats, which is a bit of an odd thing to find. We have, however, got an armrest with a couple of extra arm holders, and an added bonus as well is you can get the centre section of the seat down so you can load longer items through from the boot, so that is something. We have got a couple of nice features in the back here as well, including a couple of USB-C charging inputs and tri-zone climate control, which is something. And then on the outer seats we have got Isofix support. However, in typical Volkswagen Group style, we have got the plastic clips which are easy to break and easy to use, so just be aware of that. But all in all, I think it's absolutely fine for people of my size, but if you are a taller adult, yes, you might feel a little bit claustrophobic in here. And then we have got the windows, which are of an okay size, but don't forget we have got that sloping roof line, so just be wary again, if you are taller you probably can't see fully out the window. And what is disappointing is that the windows themselves only go about 75% of the way down, so that's a bit disappointing in this class. But we have got an additional window in the C-pillar to add a little bit of extra light in. But all in all, I'm actually fine sat here in the back of the Porsche Macan, but if you are taller than me, then yes, you might struggle. But I think that's enough of looking at the back of the Porsche Macan. Let's have a little look at the boot. Opening the boot of the Porsche Macan presents you with 500 litres of space. Okay, I'm just messing with you. The actual boot release button is here underneath the rear wiper. But as I was saying, you've got 500 litres of space in the back of the Macan, which is good, but nowhere near the class best. But what I do like is that it is a nice square load area, so you can load large bulky items into the back of the Macan. And it's not devoid of features either. We've got some pretty sturdy tethering hooks here. We've got a 12 volt socket, and we've got a little area where you could put something like a first aid kit. Then underneath the boot floor, we have got a little bit of additional space. Now if you did go for a space saver spare wheel, you would probably lose that space. And we have got the subwoofer for the Bose sound system, so that does take up a little bit of that extra space. Things which are a little bit disappointing is that you can't get the parcel shelf underneath the boot floor. That's something I thought Porsche would have looked at. But what I do like is you have got the 40-20-40 split in the rear seats, so again you can load larger items or longer items through into the rear passenger space, which is very handy. And because this particular car has got air suspension, there is a button here that you can press and hold, and it will actually drop down the rear of your Macan, which makes it easier if you are loading any large, heavy, bulky items into the back of the Macan, or perhaps you've got a bit of an old Labrador and you've got to help her up into the boot area. So that's one feature I really do like. But yeah, all in all, it's a decent amount of boot space, but in this class, it's not class best. And I think that's enough of looking at the practicality side of the Porsche Macan. I think we've got to go for a drive, haven't we? So once you get driving in the Macan S, the first impressions are really good. You firstly find that the Macan feels like a really solid and sturdy bit of metal, and you feel very safe inside. You never really get that impression from its exterior. And then once you start driving, you find it's a very easy car to drive, and visibility is really good as well. Now yes, you have got some reasonably thick A-pillars, and I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions, but some of you may do. And then looking over your shoulder, you find there's a reasonably thick C-pillar, but it's not too bad. You have got blind spot monitoring on the Macan S. And then you find rear visibility is actually really good as well, although again, it's not the class best. The only thing I will actually mention straight away is that your driving position is a little bit different to other SUVs you may drive. And by that I mean the seating position, as I mentioned earlier, is spot on because there's plenty of adjustment in the seat, and I have got the 14-way electrically adjustable seats. But as I'm sat here, my left leg is ever so slightly kinked towards the centre of the footwell, and that's because there is a bit of intrusion from the kind of engine bay and transmission tunnel. So that's just something to be aware of, and I do recommend taking a test drive of the Macan to make sure you're fine with it. I mean, when I drove the Macan back from Reading, I did about 77 miles to Milton Keynes, and it was absolutely fine, but it is just something to get used to initially when you start driving the Macan. But yeah, first impressions of this sporty SUV are absolutely brilliant. I am really loving it, and in typical me fashion, I'm already falling for it. I might not want to give it back. Now there are 4 trim levels in the Macan range to choose from. There's the entry-level Macan, the Macan S, which is what I've got here, the GTS and the Manic Turbo. Now, in all honesty, my pick of the range would actually be this S, because if you go for the entry level, you can only get a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, and then the S, GTS and Turbo are all variations of the same V6 petrol engine. And the reason I recommend this S is because you've just got full use of all that power. You've got 354 brake horsepower, 418 Newton meters of torque, and you can use it every day. You can use it for overtaking, you can use it for launching from the lights, and it still puts a smile on your face. If you go for the GTS, you've got an extra 20 brake horsepower, and if you go for the Turbo, you're into the 400s when it comes to brake horsepower. But really, you're spending quite a lot of money when you get to the Turbo, and you might as well start considering things like a base or entry level Cayenne. But I am really loving the S because I can use all the power, I can use all the aspects of this car and get the performance and the fun factor out of it as well. Now, in terms of options, as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a few of them fitted to this particular car. In fact, just shy of £20,000, which means if this car if I just wanted to spend the 69 grand on this car, I could go straight for a turbo. But that's another reason why I like the S, because you can personalize it, you can do what you want to in terms of really making it your own. And yes, you can spend a lot of money, it is a Porsche after all, but if you were to do the same with something like a GTS or a turbo, well, then you'd be spending even more money still. So that's another reason why I do recommend the S as being the best trim to go for. It just seems to tick all the boxes for usability and fun factor. Engine choices in the Macan range, well, technically there's one engine per trim level. So the entry level Macan gets a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged unit producing 245 brake horsepower, and that's lifted straight from the Golf GTI. Now personally, I'd only recommend that engine if you're looking to replace a Macan diesel, because for the revised version of the Macan, they have ditched the diesel and it's petrol all the way. And then we've got the 3-litre turbocharged V6 petrols, in which case you've got 3 power outputs depending on the trim level, the S, GTS and the turbo. And again, I stick by what I said about the trim levels and in regards to the engines. Just go for the S. You've got all the power you would ever need for daily driving. You've got that 354 brake horsepower, 480 Newton meters of torque, and a wonderful 7-speed PDK gearbox. That's the only gearbox choice you have. And it's just a really lovely engine. The power and the performance is there for you. 0 to 62, 5.3 seconds. I managed to get 5.5 doing a rudimentary 0 to 60 run. And yeah, it's just a perfect engine. I really love it. And what I love as well is that it's quiet around town. It's very refined when driving on the motorway. But when you do need to put your foot down, that performance is there for you, whether you're overtaking or launching from, you know, a standstill. Even now I can just put my foot down and you get that nice V6 rumble coming from the back of the Macan, and those are real exhausts, by the way. All in all, I just really love this engine. Now granted, it is an Audi derived engine. Of course, Porsche being part of the Volkswagen group, they're gonna take a few bits and pieces from everyone else, but it's a perfect engine for the Macan. I could never actually imagine the Macan with a V8. The V6 just suits it down to the ground. So yeah, again, in terms of engine choices, go with the trim choice and stick with the S. It's absolutely brilliant. So what's the ride and handling like in the Macan? Well, this particular car has got the optional air suspension, and it is, oh, it's wonderful. If you're looking to buy a Macan, this is one option you just have got to tick the box on, because it is brilliant and it does transform the Macan. Driving back from Reading to Milton Keynes, predominantly on motorways and A roads, it didn't skip a beat. I was driving on roads that I've driven on quite a few times before, and whereas I know it can be quite coarse and rough and you get the little bumps and undulations coming through, this didn't skip a beat. It just dealt with them brilliantly. It felt very quiet and refined and felt like a wonderful motorway cruiser. Now yes, when I started to drive on a less wonderful bit of tarmac, there was a bit of road noise coming into the cabin, and of course I was expecting that because look at the size of those tyres. But the ride was just wonderful. This is arguably one of the best riding cars I've reviewed, if not the best riding car. And I do definitely say, again, you've got to tick that box in the options list for the air suspension. It's worth every penny. And also you got that wonderful little gimmick where you can actually lower the ride height just to kind of keep yourself a little bit hunkered down to the ground. Or if you are going to go off-road, then of course you can lift it up and enjoy the extra ground clearance. Now I am going to mention right now, I'm not doing an off-road review of the Macan S. I think Porsche would kill me if I was to damage those 21-inch alloy wheels, and I don't want to be in trouble with them. I'd like another Porsche to review at some point. But yeah, the ride, I'm going along this A road now, which you can probably see me just kind of about shifting about, but I'm not uncomfortable, and the bumps it's just dealing with absolutely brilliantly. I am hugely impressed by it. And at the same time, refinement levels, especially when travelling on the motorway, are really good. There's not much in the way of engine noise. There's not much in the way of tyre roar, particularly if you're driving over a good bit of tarmac. And there's very little in the way of wind noise. I mean, I've got some big wing mirrors here, but I don't really hear any wind noise coming from them. All in all, this is just a very comfortable and relaxing SUV that just happens to have that sporty element hidden underneath, and you can unleash it by pressing a couple of buttons or just using your right foot and letting that engine come alive. Next, we have the handling, and oh boy, again, this is not what I was expecting. So when I started driving the Macan, the first thing that struck me is that the steering has got quite a bit of weight to it. I mean, it's not like you've got to manhandle it around, but you've really got to kind of make sure you turn it to get to go the direction you want to. And as a result, I can imagine people driving this and realising, yes, actually there is a huge sporty aspect to the Macan's drive. And again, I think it's testament to Porsche, because they've done their magic again in the Macan as they did in the Cayman, because there's loads of feel and you can accurately put the Macan where you want it to, even with just the slightest flick of the wrist. It does everything you want. It's a wonderful all-round SUV, the Macan. I wouldn't say it was an outright mad sporty SUV. You'd probably have to look at the turbo for that. But in terms of just an almost perfect all-rounder, you can't go wrong with this S. Again, the steering is wonderful. It has got loads of weight, but it's beautifully weighted, if that makes sense. You know exactly what the front wheels are doing. And the traction as well. You can throw this into a roundabout, into a corner with a bit of reckless abandon, and it holds on. It rewards you tenfold compared to other cars out there. The only car I've driven that comes remotely close, but that was with a diesel engine and doesn't really have this performance unless you go for the absolute mad trim, and I've mentioned it before, is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Just the regular Stelvio with the diesel engine I drove a couple of years ago felt as fun as this, but this just feels a little bit more precise and sharper as a result. It's something I truly love on this Macan. Again, Porsche, I don't think Porsche can do wrong in this day and age. So when it comes to niggles in the Macan, what have I found? Well, not really that many. I mean, I've mentioned the left foot being kind of pushed more to the centre of the footwell, and then the infotainment system being a little bit fiddly when using it on the move. And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else I'd say on the Macan that needs improving. I mean, the ride is wonderful. Of course, it is an optional air suspension, but no, I really like it. If I was going to go for a Macan, there's a number of the features on this particular one that I would go for. I do love the Bose sound system. It's got a very nice crisp sound to it, and yeah, just all in all, I feel like I'm in a very high quality product, and I really am impressed by it. So yeah, very few little niggles, which I've already mentioned in the Macan, and I think it's now time to do the verdict. So what are my thoughts on the Porsche Macan S? Well, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. This is an absolutely brilliant little sporty SUV. In terms of ride and handling, this is clearly the class best. Now, it's not perfect because it is let down in a couple of key areas, namely price and practicality. Some of its rivals are cheaper and they are more powerful, and at the same time they're also more practical. And that kind of leaves me to say that yes, this is a sporty SUV, but it's not a sports SUV, if that makes sense. Because if this was a sports SUV at this price, this would be probably the GTS or the Turbo in order to compete with its rivals, but it's not. This is the middle of the range S, and although it is my pick of the range because you got all the performance that you would need and it's at a decent price, against some of its rivals you would kind of question why spend a little bit extra, but you do know why when you drive it, because you are rewarded in the styling, the drive, the ride, in a lot of aspects of the Macan. It's one of the few SUVs that can put a big smile on your face. And I know I'm being a bit old-fashioned here as well, but I love all the buttons in here. I mean, I'd love to see someone have a panic attack who's used to like dealing with Tesla Model S screens and such. This would really throw them off. And again, that's another one of the reasons why I absolutely love this Macan. Now, I am expecting when the next generation comes along, it will be electric, and more than likely it will have the same interior as the Panamera and the Cayenne, which is no bad thing, but it loses a tiny bit of that user friendliness. But all in all, this revised version of the Macan and this Macan S is just brilliant. It's one of the best SUVs out there, period. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Porsche Macan S, because I know I've really enjoyed reviewing it. As always, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. I'm always on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and always advise that you follow me on there as well for additional content, including live videos and still images. Also, if you've got any comments or questions about the Macan and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. But guys, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I hope you're maintaining your social distancing, wearing a mask and staying safe. And I will catch you all in the next video. So take care and bye-bye.